Okay, very good evening, and I apologize for the signal loss. It is peak period in Abuja around about 6 o'clock, 5:36. So you're going to have a lot of people riding back and forth and talking on their cell phones while they're in traffic. So I apologize for that. So what I'm doing rather is uploading it here so we can understand. So just let me begin at the beginning. And the subject of this is state capture and Standing Rock and separating the bullshit. Okay, I think it was April, and I'm open to correction, in April in Oregon at a bird sanctuary. A bunch of white guys led by the Bundy brothers, heavily armed white guys, occupied a bird sanctuary in Oregon. And I think everybody understands the argument about the federal government ceding land to the state, apart from the fact that the land belongs to traditionally, historically, and otherwise belong to the northern Paiute Indian tribe. However, I mean, these guys were joined by heavily armed white guys from all over the country. It was resolved. They went to court. 6 or 7 of them, including the 2 Bundy brothers, were released. They were acquitted. However, if you juxtapose that to the Standing Rock issue, where we've got 4,000 Indians arguing about reclaiming their land, number one. Number two, refusing for this private companies oil pipeline to go through their territory. The federal government, state government, got 5 states around there, 5 states, and brought their state troopers, police, you name it, baton charges people, maced them, beat them up, arrested them, and they weren't even armed. Now, you're going to ask me, first of all, and I hope you're going to ask me this, why am I bringing this up? Number 2, what has it got to do with state capture? You see, sometimes when you see something, it's like this. Let me explain it like this. You know how we know there's stars? How do we see stars? We see stars in the sky. However, those stars, many of the stars, are probably not stars anymore. It refers to dead stars. We're seeing the reflection millions of light years after they in fact died. What I mean by this is the reason why the police, why the federal government is mistreating, and their reaction is so paranoid and hysterical, is because the federal government in America knows a fundamental fact. And the fundamental fact is that the Indians own every square inch of America. That America, up to today, is still illegally occupied by illegal aliens who, after the genocide of more than 100 million Indians, forced them off their land, forced them into reserves. And now, if the Indians are successful at removing this private corporation from running a pipeline through their country, through their land, they will then go, hey, we can actually fight to get our entire country back. There is a classic case of state capture, that the state of Turtle Island, now known as America, was forcibly, genocidally, brutally, inhumanly stolen at the battle of a gun over a period of 100 years, plus enslavement of millions of African people illegally. So if you look at America's history, America is all about state capture. Over the last 200 years, America has gone about the business of state capturing all over the world. They state captured Vietnam. They state capture, well, Iraq is still in a state of state capture. Libya is still in a state of state capture. This is the business of America. More so if you look throughout Africa and you understand the scramble for Africa and what was decided with King Leopold, the late, unfortunately, King Leopold, was all about state capture. The separation of Africa into so-called states where we as Africans never even agreed that these countries, this should be our borders, etc., that was thrust upon us. Names of countries was thrust upon us. A name like South Africa, which is a geographical position south of Africa, that is Africa but not in Africa. Constantly I have to hear about companies in South Africa who say, "Oh, we are going into Africa." You in South Africa, that is Africa. Is that not Africa? Oh no, we're going into Africa, as if South Africa is a separate state to both physically and otherwise and geographically to Africa. So, what is it got to do with state capture? Let me explain to you state capture. They're pointing out really the essence of a 335 page, and I kind of went through the key points of it. Is trying to say, well, we assume that Jacob Zuma did blah, 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 blah. Look, personally, I don't give a footless fuck what Jacob Zuma stole. In fact, if Jacob Zuma would steal 10 million rand every single day for the next 10 years, he wouldn't even come close to what one family has stolen in South Africa. One family, and this is the Oppenheimers, have stolen billions and billions and trillions of dollars worth of natural resources in South Africa. You want to know what state capture is? There is only one human being that is allowed to fly over the center of London, the financial district, which is 1 square mile by 1 square mile, in any form of aircraft. Not even the Queen of England is allowed to fly over this airspace. Please go and Google it. One man is allowed to do that. And that man is a South African man. And that man is Nicky Oppenheimer. Don't you think it's strange? What kind of state capture? What kind of privileges does this guy have? That any touring cricket team, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when any cricket touring team comes to play a tour, an official sanctioned tour in South Africa, they first have to go and play a tour at his cricket ground. I don't know if you're aware of that. Yes, that is indeed so. I never say anything without having thorough knowledge of the subject at hand. So let's really talk about state capture. So that we, as black people, we need to understand the idea, the philosophy of state capture. Because all of a sudden, state capture is this new word bandied about. And we must always be very much aware that when the white-owned media starts using a word and bandying a word about, that there's something behind that. Very much like Standing Rock, that the expression, the reaction, the hysterical as it may be, of the federal government is not, yes, of course it's racist. We understand that. Yes, of course we can juxtapose the argument of the Bundys, the acquittal, heavily armed white guys, and Indians. It's not about that. It is about Indians realizing that they living in a perpetual state of state capture. As black people, since 1652, have been in a perpetual state of state capture. I'll give an example. As you know, I live in Nigeria. The average Nigerian can go and catch a fish wherever, whenever there's an ocean. He can go catch a fish. In fact, he can catch as many fish as he like. Not in South Africa. Not in South Africa. I've been to many African countries and I constantly ask people, can you just go and catch fish? They say, what a stupid question to ask me. Can we just go and catch fish? Because you see, in South Africa, we can't just go and catch fish. Tony Smith, you can bear me out. You cannot just catch fish. Because you need a license to go catch fish. And then they will tell you when you can catch fish. Yet, major corporations, all of them primarily white-owned, can catch as much bloody fish as they want. With these huge industrial vessels, can catch tons and tons and tons and tons of fish. Of course, we have the one or two blackface guys. Chris Nissen, the ex-pastor who was sleeping around with Alan Busak's secretary. We know your story, mister. And then all of a sudden he defrocked. Wow, what a name. He defrocked. And then now he's the chairman of the fishing guys. Multi-millionaire. So we understand how state capture worked. They captured his backside. The saddest thing for me of this whole idea of state capture is that I see activists I know personally, who from back in the day were actual activists, are now in favor of and supporting this whole idea of pay back the money. Zuma is so corrupt. Blah. Every bloody politician is corrupt. Whether he is in America, go and look what's happening right now. Zuma is a small fry corrupt guy. More so, the entire idea of state capture is driven, whether we like it or not, by the anti-BRICS movement, which is Western European international capital, wanting to remove South Africa from its association by BRICS. And we've spoken about this before. However, you must remember that if South Africa, particularly led by one Jacob Zuma, places South Africa firmly into the court of the BRICS nations, we know already that what has happened was state capture in Brazil. That Rosal, a democratically elected president, moved Brazil's economy and nationhood from being in bed with European capital, moved it into the BRICS nations. She was removed as president. Now a president, who was a cousin president, received 1% of the vote, is now the president, and proven to be a corrupt guy, is now the president of Brazil. White capital, internally in South Africa, those who have profited from our capture, as people of color. Our land is in capture. Our natural resources is in capture. Let me ask you a question. Who of you actually sat and for 1 minute just thought about this? Who in heaven names gave the right to the Oppenheimer family to own most of South Africa's mines? Who gave them the authority? We know they stole it. We know they murdered tens of thousands of Africans. We know that the owners before that, Cecil John Rhodes, was African Hitler, was responsible for the murder, the genocidal murder of millions of Africans. And I quote what Cecil John Rhodes said about Zimbabwe. I want every nigger on every mud hut, on every hill, burnt out and burnt to the ground and killed. This is Cecil John Rhodes. Today, all of the property this guy owned is owned by one family, Oppenheimer. That they own a company called De Beers, who last year posted, and when it was declared, obviously it's a times 10, depends on how you want to look at it, posted a $7.5 billion profit. South African company. Gold, let's talk about capture. South Africa has produced more than 70% of all the world's gold. South Africa owns 80% of the world's platinum. If South Africa is firmly in BRICS market, the BRICS camp, between South Africa and Russia, they will control 90% of the world's platinum. They will control 60 to 70% of the world's gold production and gold reserves. Did you know? Here's a did you know Chappie's moment. Did you know that India is the biggest consumer of gold in the world? The biggest single market of gold? The biggest single market of gold is India. That the two countries with the biggest reserves of gold is China and Russia. And if we add those countries together plus Iran, all of a sudden Western powers and Western capital are seriously in the cold. So, bear in mind that they have to remove Jacob Zuma by any means necessary. And I'm going to predict something here. I know it's a horrible prediction, but I have to predict this. I predict that Jacob Zuma is going to die in the next 2 years or the next year from a very aggressive cancer. I predict that. They're going to do this to him. Like they did with Chavez, they will do that with him. They need to move Jacob Zuma. They need to move him fast, because you know what's going to happen? All of the millions and millions they're investing in the EFF and the I Stand for South Africa movement and the This movement and all of these Mickey Mouse movements to move Jacob Zuma is not going to happen. Jacob Zuma is far smarter than everybody thinks he is. Jacob Zuma, whether we like it or not, he can always be dealt with at a later stage. Jacob Zuma must be supported. Jacob Zuma must be supported to ensure that state capture, the original thieves who own and occupy our country, are removed. So I thank you for listening, and please post any questions that you'd like, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. That is separating the bullshit from the facts.